some great printers around here. I've tried doing it myself a little bit, which is like you can see where the learning curve is. But lithography is fun, screen printing is fun. A friend of mine had some risograph machines.
Yeah, risograph is awesome.
We got one of those at Columbia, or a couple of those at Columbia, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like very, very fun, and also it's a very dramatic machine, but we love it.
Yeah, they glitch up, they glug up all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, I just got this cool book. A former student of mine named Hannah Antelek made this Riso print book from like off of some of her drawings, and it's pretty cool. Like the colors came out really nice. This probably doesn't translate on Zoom, but it's like off of marker and color pencil drawings.
That's all Rizzo too?
This is all Rizzo, yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Little cat.
Yeah, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, she told me the name of the printer that she worked with. The one in Brooklyn.
All right, let's
see risograph.
A few more people to roll in, and then I think we can get started.
That's a cool elephant.
Wow, that's awesome. This is one of your students that did this?
Former student? 2012. She's been out for a long time, so I probably shouldn't refer to her that way, but she's cool. She has a cool, she does a lot of cool drawings. She like that. And she has her name's Hannah Antelek. She has a nice Instagram feed too, where she posts a lot of them.
I'll have to go follow her. Get the plug to Hannah. Yeah, all right, cool. Well, I think we're about ready to go. The live stream is up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is a really, really exciting talk we have today, and I'm super happy about it. And I've been excited about it all week. So I'm glad Rob can join us. Robert Hult has had several solo exhibitions of drawings under his pseudonym, Butt Johnson, at CRG Gallery in New York and at Tally Dunn Gallery in Dallas, Texas, as well as in group exhibitions at the Contemporary Art Museum, Houston, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Tucson, Arizona, and the Pizzuti Collection in Columbus, Ohio. He is a recipient of a grant from the Pollock Krasner Foundation and has worked in the collections of the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York and the RISD Museum in Providence, Rhode Island. He is also a founder and owner of Klaus von Nixagent Gallery in New York, a contemporary art gallery located in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. He lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. Take it away, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Darby. Is it Darby or Darby Jack?
Darby Jack.
Darby Jack. Thank you, Darby Jack. And thank you all, everyone, for joining us. It's nice to meet you guys and talk about my work with you. And both my own drawings, and I'll talk about the gallery that I run as well. And I'll start kind of from the beginning. So I'll give you like a kind of over the years tour, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. You can ask me whatever you want. Keep it a little casual. So this is one of my drawing spots. I have like a separate studio where I work, and in the apartment where I live with my wife and daughter, I have a little desk set up just so that I always have a place that I can work in case I have extra time. And it's a small setup, literally just a T-square and a triangle. You can see like a lot of my pens. I'm a big pen nerd and pen collector. So I'm always got a lot of those different kinds of pens and colors around. And it's nice to just have like a lower stakes place to work to. Like, I mean lower stakes because I feel like I can experiment a little bit more here than my drawing table in my studio is bigger, and I try and do more, I guess, ambitiously scaled works over there. Okay. So my name is Rob, but I work under a pseudonym of Butt Johnson, which is a very silly name that I came up with when I was a student in undergrad. And I guess a part of my rebellious streak about like using my own name, I would say even as a kid, I didn't work under my own name. I always invented other mostly stupid names to work under. There's like a tension of like how people come to a certain expectation when they encounter the artist name, and so I've always wanted to kind of tool into that, and the name Butt Johnson gives me a lot of flexibility. It's like divorced from anything based on reality. So, and I think it gives a certain sense of humor also. And it also gives me cover as an art gallerist too, because some people know me in that capacity, and you do run into strange conflicts of perception, I'll say, necessary or unnecessary. So I've worked under the name Butt Johnson probably since like 2001. This is the gallery I run, which is located on Ludlow Street on the Lower East Side. I have two partners that I run it with, Sam Wilson and Ingrid Bromberg Kennedy. And this is our storefront. Klaus von Nixhagen is another fictitious name. There is no Klaus von Nixhagen. And when we first opened the store in Williamsburg, we wanted to have there was not a lot of galleries in Williamsburg. Most of the art world in New York was centered in Chelsea, some on the Lower East Side and some in Midtown, and definitely a few had been around for a while in Williamsburg, but we wanted to have like a sort of pretentious art dealer sounding name. And Nixhagen is phonetically, Nicht is nothing and Sagen is saying. So it's like a German colloquial, like it's like Klaus von doesn't say anything or can't explain it. I've heard it used colloquially a few different ways. This was my first studio in Brooklyn in New York back in 2001. It was an old warehouse that I shared with like 3 other people. And I was there for about a year, and it was big enough that I could have made paintings, and I did start to, but I started making small drawings and focusing more on my drawings, and I was only using a small section of this. So after about a year, I realized I would probably get more work done if I just worked out of my apartment. So just to give you a hint of like one of the reasons I transitioned into working from home. Around this time, I started, this is like 2001, 2002. I started experimenting with ballpoint pen a little bit more, and I always kind of drew as a side practice. I drew a lot of comics when I was younger. And I found around this time, I was looking at a lot of old master drawings, and I realized that ballpoint pen as a sort of grayish black medium, if you handle it very lightly on the paper, you can build up tone. And I found it actually started to look a little bit like engravings, like old master engravings. And I was like, well, that's an interesting language to kind of creep up into. And, you know, what would happen if I start incorporating like contemporary ideas into these old master drawings? And a lot of them are straight up pastiche. Like I was pulling off of old master drawings that I found in books. And another nice thing about the master drawings is that a lot of the symbolism is like obsolete. Like they're allegorical in some ways. Some are, you know, symbologies, Christian symbologies, European myths, and I was like, well, I don't even know what these are. So, you know, it's an interesting commentary on contemporary culture and how quickly it cycles, that you can work in things like aliens. This was actually the first one I did, this incident near Roswell, New Mexico, of the downed craft, and thinking about that as its own kind of myth. I saw an article about 2002 in a magazine called Print Magazine, which is like a graphic design magazine. And it showed these images of what are called securities engravings. And these are basically stock and bond certificates that were created in the turn of the century. So if you wanted to invest in a railroad company and you paid $1,000, you would get a hand printed engraved stock certificate. I thought this article was really cool, and I was amazed by some of the drawing and craftsmanship and ornamentation in it. And so I, like, this is kind of before the web 2.0, but I looked up the author in the phone book and called him, and he was this really nice guy named Mark Tomasco, and he used to work down on Wall Street, and he collects these. So he invited me up to see his collection, and it was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, this is amazing. I looked through all these amazing hand done engravings. And he knew so much about it, so he was able to fill in a lot of the background. The building is still there. It's called the American Banknote Company, and it's right next to the stock exchange. You can see it's cut in stone next. That they don't make them that way anymore, but for 100 years they did. And it was like a 10-year apprenticeship to engrave at this level. So you'd probably be sharpening tools for your first year and cleaning plates and before they let you actually do anything. But it's a lot of sophisticated kinds of printmaking. These are not one plate. There are multiple ornaments, some of which were transferred onto wheels. So you would cut it into a plate and then use a softer metal to cast off of, like literally press in and cast the engraving onto another metal surface. And then it would be on a cylinder. And then you would roll the cylinder onto another plate as a protruding relief. So some of them were made this way. Some of them, there's these very tight, I don't know if I have any pictures of them, but there's these very tight geometric lathe engravings. Oh, these areas. If you look at a dollar bill, you'll see these extremely complicated geometric patterns, or a $20 bill. And that's like it's kind of like a very sophisticated clock that has a needle that gets pushed around, kind of like a spirograph, but way more complicated. So, I was trying to figure out how to mimic some of these. And actually, I made this drawing before I met Mark Tomasco. I made this based off of the magazine article. And it's called Postmodern Daves, based around writers named Dave that were operating a lot in the early 2000s. So like Dave Hickey, Dave Sedaris, Dave Rakoff, Dave Foster Wallace, and Dave Eggers. They were like a lot of the things that I was reading around the time. And then I threw in Davy Crockett as like a red herring. And again, Google image search didn't exist yet. It was still the dawn of like the internet kind of. We had, we were able to search web pages had images, but it was an inkling of the way that information would just be crunched, condensed together. And you guys are probably used to scrolling on Instagram and websites and seeing very disparate kinds of inspiration all pressed together, but it was kind of a new experience for us back then. So I wanted to kind of find a way to compress it all into two-dimensional space, and using these engravings, which were made at the turn of the 20th century. So they're experiencing, railroads and electricity and a different kind of connectivity. So, metaphorically, it also was interesting to think about that, 100 years, this kind of language is still operating and still useful. And I was working in things from like Cowboy Bebop to Jason from Friday the 13th to the I Ching to Nintendo controllers and the World Trade Center on fire in the background, which literally had just happened. And like chaos mathematics and smiley faces, all that stuff all together. Here's a close-up. And, again, operating in ballpoint, I introduced a little bit of green ballpoint. So I would draw in the black pen very lightly and then sort of shade it with a green one to give it like a tint. And trying to figure out how to make these, this is done with a spirograph. So trying to get close to that geometric lathe work. I later figured out how to do it a little more tightly. This is my first desk in my apartment, which was like a picnic table that I found on the street. And I had piles of paper and pens and an ashtray and whatever around, and just like operating. I think the first drawing I made when I started working from home was this Mario drawing, which I don't know if I have a picture of. Oh yeah, here it is. And here's the print magazine. I still have it as a reference, just like kicking around. And maybe I hadn't found Mark Tomasco yet. I think I milked this, like whatever was printed in this, for all it was worth. Before I was like, okay, I'm out of material. I need to find the source. So again, thinking about like mythologies, and especially I was like 22. So there's a certain, you all are probably experiencing this, but you start to have a certain amount of nostalgia for the things of your youth. You're far enough away from it that it no longer seems immediate, and you start to have a lot of like deep, complicated feelings towards the things that you experienced when you were a kid. So they start to feel mythological for you, or they did for me. So that was something that I was thinking a lot about making this Mario drawing. And I was also living in Brooklyn, where Mario is from, right? So thinking about like, I used a template from St. George and the Dragon, and from two different St. George and the Dragons, which is like a very popular iconography from medieval era and Renaissance. One was from a Raphael painting, and the other one was another Italian named Martelli. And then incorporating ornaments like piping and the sewer stuff, I don't know, stuff from the game, and then the rotating coins and stars, and I threw in Darth Vader's helmet as like a way to kind of talk about the transition from movies to video games also. So lots of fun allegories in here. Then I moved on to another kind of symbology. I don't know if this is relevant to you guys. The SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's a science project. I think it was run out of UC Berkeley for a long time. I don't know if it still is, but they basically scan the stars looking for patterns, radio wave patterns. And what they did, there's so much information in the night sky that is like junk noise. So they invented this thing, distributed computing. Like anybody could download an app and then process their information for them. So it was one of the first like, what's the, I'm blanking on what it's called, but crowdsourcing. It's one of the first crowdsourcing like science projects. So I wanted to use it sort of as an allegory of like unrequited love or like feeling alone in the universe. And it definitely tied into some personal heartbreak around the time. And I brought in things like the Voyager spacecraft and DNA and motor neurons, and you'll see some satellites down here. I think I have a close-up here. And this is what the screensaver, it used to be a screensaver that you would see it pop up and process information. So this was taken from the screensaver, and this was their logo. And then there's like cuneiform manuscripts from ancient Sumeria talking about like the gods in the skies. And I was really into the like ancient aliens kind of stuff back in the day too. So I really try to milk this kind of template for as much as I could in the first 10 years I was working in New York. I did a drawing about the Iraq War at the height of it. And I would say each one of these took me about anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. I topped off at this Iraq War one, took me 2 years. Because I had to learn like Islamic patterning and Islamic geometry, which was really complicated. So there's a lot of sort of uphill learning curves with some of these, but it was all really interesting stuff. And I was thinking about like medieval heraldry and what a horrendous crusade the Iraq War was. You know, we were out protesting against it at the time. It didn't seem to matter, but you know, there's like roses and blown up cars, and I brought in hydrocarbons to try and talk about like oil and IEDs, cell phone explosives. The bottom here, it's amazing how much information you can embed into ornament. You know, these little Nokia cell phones hooked up to C4. And then this is the World Trade Center. You know, the kind of ornament band folds into the World Trade Center that opens up into Saddam Hussein's parade ground. So it, you know, connects 9/11 and the Iraq War, which there was no connection of, except they used it as an excuse. And then this background was a 10-star repeating Islamic geometry that so this is 2 colors. I did it in a black ballpoint, and then I tinted just the background in a purple ballpoint. Purple ballpoint doesn't stay purple for very long, word to the wise. So this is sort of pinkish now, but it still looks cool. I saw it recently again. At the same time, some friends of mine stumbled on an empty storefront in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It was very reasonably priced. I think it was $400 a month when we first started renting it there, and invited me to take part in it. And so I started putting on shows we weren't like a professionalized art gallery. We were open on the weekends, and we would take shifts. So one person would be there like 11 to 2. The next person would be there 2 to 5 or something like that. So we split up the time, and we just like artists that we knew or friends from art school. I went to RISD, and one of the other partners went to Cal Arts. So we were kind of trading off. And then people from the neighborhood that we met in Brooklyn, we were showing very casually with no like long-term plan, just to put on shows of work that we liked. And it's funny, you start something not knowing where it's going to go, but so this was our first show. There's an artist named Pamela Jordan, who's based in Los Angeles, a great painter. We still work with her. We just did our like 7th or 8th show with her. She also shows with a gallery in Los Angeles called Philip Martin, and one in San Francisco called Romer Young. We had fake walls, like these walls were like doors, hollow core doors that were up. Eventually we put in real walls. But you don't need much to hang art. You just need some blank walls and artwork. We did a group show where we invited other printmaking friends that we knew we did a multiple show, and we priced everything like $75 to like $200, I think. And it was in December, so it was like holiday season, and I think we made like $1,500 in sales, and we're like, holy shit, this is so much money. And we actually put all the money back into it, and we used it to build walls. So here's like our proper walls. Oops. And I invited some friends that I knew from school, Donna Chung and Liz Luisada, to hang work. We did a drawing show. This was 2005 by now. And like this show is significant because someone from the New York Times showed up and reviewed the show, which was our first like public press review. And I should say Williamsburg, Brooklyn was a much lower key neighborhood back then. And so it was cool to like have some recognition after about, what was this, like 4 or 5 months of doing it. So that's the thing, like, it's called the escalation of commitment. You put a little bit in, and then you get a little bit out, and then you feel like, okay, well, if I do this, maybe we'll get this out of it. And it keeps sort of accumulating. And here's me in 2005, in case that wasn't obvious. And it's a good way to get people together and have conversations and like be a locus of some kind of community. And it's always surprising who shows up. And it's never boring, and it gives you an excuse to like get out of your studio and talk to people. This is Sam Wilson and Ingrid Kennedy here. We started doing art fairs. This is NADA Miami, the New Art Dealers Alliance. I don't know if that's familiar to you, but it's they do some art fairs. It's an arts organization, and they do a smaller fair during the Art Basel fair in Miami. And we did it our first time in 2007. And it was totally scary. Like, we hadn't really dealt with clients in that way, that kind of concentration of like art world all together. We were very like new to the whole thing. And I think it took me like 2 weeks to like sleep it off because I was traumatized. But it was a good way to meet people and get our artists' work out there. And this was a show we did in 2006, a couple of years into it. A gallery called CRG, which I later ended up working with as an artist, invited the gallery to do their summer show. So they had a big space in Chelsea, in Manhattan, which was a long way away from Williamsburg, conceptually, but not physically. But we rebuilt our like dumpy Williamsburg storefront in their Chelsea gallery, and even brought our garbage cans that we serve beer in, and did a group show with our artists, and it worked. Like, we sold more work than we ever had and would for the next like 5 years probably. And we got another New York Times review for the show. And we actually like spent a lot more time there because we were manning the gallery during the run of the show. We all had full-time jobs too. I was working in publishing. My partner was working Ingrid was working as a graphic designer, and Sam was working for a fashion designer. So this was still very much like a part-time gig. People wrote a musical. Ryan McNamara, who's an amazing performance artist, this guy here, wrote a musical called Klaus von Nixzug and the Musical, inventing a fictitious art gallerist named Klaus, who immigrates from Germany. We gave our artists free reign. This is an artist named Glenn Baldridge. Those of you who are interested in printmaking, you should check out Glenn Baldridge and Fourth Estate Editions, the company he started, because they do amazing prints. They did. He's not doing that anymore, but he did like a sunset vinyl stencil on our storefront, on our plexiglass windows. We had performances. This is Jennifer Sullivan, Rena Thurston, and Rachel Mason, who did a like ladies' night performance. This is an artist named Alex Dodge that we work with still, who made like a fake Apple design store. This is 2010, and this was our last show at these were like, none of these actually worked. They're all like artificial theoretical design objects. And this was our last show in Brooklyn. It was 2010, and we kind of were like, we were doing like 2 or 3 shows with artists in this space, and we were like, if we want to take it to the next level, this is also the escalation of commitment. We were like, we have to move to Manhattan, and a lot of galleries that we knew from doing Nada were opening up on the Lower East Side. So we decided to close up and write up a business plan and actually like really formalize this as a business and try and move to the city. And we did around this time. And I was still working in my studio doing these drawings. I made this drawing around the theme of narcissism, and like graffiti. There's graffiti everywhere, I'm sure in Chicago too. So it's always been a part of the visual landscape that I've been interested in, and I wanted to make like a butt tag. So this was my my go at it. And I worked in like narcissus flowers and the ornaments, and this little like Greek metamorphosis of Narcissus. And here's a map I did based on the board game Risk, and an old British map of the British Empire from the 1880s. This is 2009. I was still thinking about, mythologies and ways that we understand the world. And so I brought in all these characters from like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat as a way to kind of connect these like broad globalist ideas, like ways that we think about globalism. And then this game Risk, which is very much like a Cold War era board game about colonial era like political domination. So I was thinking a lot about this, especially in the Bush administration. And this is kind of the tail end of that. I think Obama was elected right when I started this drawing. So, and this is like Princess Leia and the Sorceress from He-Man and Chitara from Thundercats. I don't even know if those names ring for you guys. If Thundercats is just like totally obscure now. Here's a drawing about architecture. I called it Starchitects. There was another video game called Civilization 3, and the intro screen was this Tower of Babel. And I was like, that's just such a great idea. So I totally stole it. And pretty much verbatim, like from the computer game. It starts in ancient Babylon and goes into Greece and Rome, up into medieval and Baroque and 19th century up into modern skyscrapers. So that was also, this one took me about 1.5 years of learning about architecture and 5-point perspective and figuring out how to make this. It's got like HVAC piping and architecture tools and masonry tools up here, and the logo of the American Institute of Architects, and lots of symbolism. Yeah, here's a close-up shot of one of the more complicated areas, which is like the interaction of the Gothic architecture with the medieval stuff open to the 19th century, like steel frame. This, I was like, if this Gothic one is all wood, it would probably collapse. I don't think this tower is actually viable, but it was fun to learn about construction techniques and old cranes and how they got all those columns up in ancient Rome and the Middle Ages. And here's a photo of my larger drawing table. I upgraded from that picnic table in 2008. A friend of mine hooked me up with a drawing table from a print shop he was working in that was like in the basement, that actually belonged to an amazing historical figure named Robert Blackburn, who ran one of the first like black run print shops in New York, and did prints with like a who's who of like some of the greatest artists of the 20th century, and a great artist unto himself too. So I feel really thankful that I work on on someone like his desk. And this is a Tetris drawing. It's like a series of accumulated losses in Tetris. So like I would play until I lose and then tile them together to form this like sort of abstraction brick tower zone. And then I had a show of all these works in the beginning of 2011. And it took about 10 years to make all the work for my first solo show. So don't feel any pressure getting out in the world to be like, I have to have a show right away. Where am I showing? What gallery am I showing? It's like, it doesn't matter. Just like, make the work, make good work. It'll come when it needs to come. And I felt pretty happy to have all this work done and up on the wall, and I got a great response to it. It was nice to get Bud Johnson out in the world. And around this exact same time, we found a space on the Lower East Side as a gallery. It was on Ludlow Street. There was like a DJ that lived through this door here. You would walk through like an elevator shaft down this hallway, and then it opened up into this like sort of back room space with a skylight. So we converted it. We took over this the space back here. I guess there were like a bunch of parties that they used to have back here. This is the old storefront, which was before the DJ lived there, I think an architectural supply company. And we didn't do much besides to the back. Like we just left the hallway and the storefront and put our name on it. And then we had a show of Jonah Capel, who's based in Chicago, and just had a show at Matt LeBlanc Gallery. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Anyway, Jonah's a great artist. He was from Chicago, was in New York for a long time, and then moved back to Chicago a couple of years ago. This is the space. This is Joy Curtis, who's based in New York. Sculptures. Back to my drawing table. I had been using these parallel lines technique as a way to define space for a time. I did a series of drawings about like floral ornaments and flowers, and it's an old engraver's way. Like you can vary the lines to create depth, and you'll see them a lot in cloud forms and skies, the way they use these. And they're actually used to have ruling machines that would do them. But I always thought they were interesting, and I thought like, oh, maybe I can just get rid of the imagery. I had been working like trying to pack so many ideas into my work, and I was like, I just want to focus on like drawing techniques and try and be inventive with what I'm doing. So I started like just doing total abstractions and thinking about color, thinking about combinations of lines, and thinking about like scribbling, drawing very quickly, and then encasing those drawings in a much slower process. And I spent about 5 years working like this. And these are all pen wipes. So those of you that work in ballpoint, you'll notice that you get like beads of ink quite a bit. And I was constantly wiping my pen to keep the ink off, but then I decided to embrace it and bring it into the work for a little bit. And these circles I draw in pencil very quickly, and then I draw over the whole thing in ink, and then I erase out the pencil. So that's how these are operated. And this is a series of brown lines and a series of blue lines, and then what looks like purple is just an intersection of them. So it's kind of, your brain is computing that as a color, even though it's two very different colors. Here's another one, drawing long lines, and then in these chevron patterns, instead of drawing straight, I'm picking it up a few times, going through, and as they accumulate, it starts to form like almost rain pattern. And this is real subtle, but it starts off a little pinker, and then it gets a little more like primary colors towards the middle, and then it gets pinker again. So varying. You saw how limited my palette was for all those years. I was really excited to try working with color. And this is what it looks like up close. So, ballpoint pens come in a wide array of colors. So it was really fun to get them all and experiment with them. And then, these kind of slashes are just a pencil line that I erased out. And then incorporating a different direction. So instead of just going up and down, I can make these sort of maze interactions. They're going in multiple directions, and this was like a couple years of experimenting. There's a do I have a close-up of this? I don't, but there's a series of like rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, 2 blues, and 2 purples. And then in between every single one of them is a thin black line. So I'm using that thin black line to separate the colors. And I drew in pencil everywhere where there's pencil, like I've omitted the black line, and then I erase the pencil out. So the colors go over the whole thing and the black lines get knocked out. And the same, that's what's happening with these shapes. So I'm able to like infer another set of information. I was thinking about like how much information can I layer on top of one another on this 2-dimensional surface. And then this is just the white of the paper. This is on a metallic paper. I made some stencils, and I started putting paper on top of the stencils. So I would cut out a thin layer of plastic stencil, lay the paper over, and then draw over it. And the pressure from the ballpoint on the paper would actually, the discrepancy between the plastic and the paper would capture the stencil underneath it, kind of like an embossing. And I stuck some pieces of tape onto the surface and then drew over them, and then I took them off at the end. So that's cool. It's got like the ink and then like no ink, but the embossing carries underneath. And then this is like another stencil that I put on top, and there's no embossing. It just is like the raw silver paper. It's got a nice metallic quality to it. Here's a work in process from the time. You can see I work generally from right to left. I have an architectural ruler or a Mayline parallel ruler that goes across the bottom of the desk, and then I have like a triangle, or I usually use a laser cut piece of plexiglass to capture curves. So that's how I'm doing that. This is sort of a double interaction of lines from 2 different directions, and every square in this is a different set of colors. I was looking at Paul Klee, obviously, a lot. If you've seen his square compositions, they're totally amazing. And so I was like, well, can I create these just generating them with different color combinations within the squares too? And so some of the squares I used a curve, some of them I used a jagged line. So there's different, I guess, shape patterns, and there's different thicknesses of pens too. So this would be like a thick pink pen with 2 thin oranges and a thin blue in one direction, and then over itself in the same direction. This is like 3 thin blues and a thin brown, orange, black, blue, black, orange. I have no idea what these are going to look like when I when I start operating them. It's just like you draw one set of lines over the whole thing vertically, and then I flip it over and I'm working on it horizontally, and it's fun. It's like totally surprising how the colors are going to gel out up close. It's interesting. I did the same thing with the pencil. I did a very quick pencil drawing here, and I'm just omitting the orange lines here. I'm just omitting the brown, one set of blues here. I'm just omitting the one set of green lines here. So it's fun, up close they become very different drawings, and then your brain kind of computes all that together to form this larger kind of tapestry of weaving. And my one idea was that like it would get more orange, more pink and orange towards the middle here. So it starts out very like bluish, darkish around the periphery. And then, just to create some motion in the overall drawing, leaving these omitted shapes. How am I doing on time here? Whoa, I got to speed up a little bit. Here's an opening at the gallery on Ludlow Street. We didn't have AC for a long time. So a lot of our openings in the summer, especially were on the sidewalk. It was a performance event that we did with David Gilbert in the background. Here's David Gilbert, LA-based photographer. Donna Chung, who's based in LA also. Show we did. 2016, a tenant in front of us who had a warehouse there moved out, and so we took over the space all the way to the street. So we did a full gut renovation of the gallery in 2016, and we incorporated the hallways and knocked holes in the walls so that our office is up front now, and we have like a more proper storefront. And we have 2 galleries, one in the front and one in the back. So we're able to do multiple shows at once. We do fundraisers, we do benefit auctions sometimes. This is a picture from an Unlocal benefit auction, which is a nonprofit law firm in New York that supports undocumented immigrants. Artist Tamara Gonzalez that we started working with around 2015. Oh no, earlier. 2014, 2015. Based in New York, a performance artist named Lauren Baxt. This is I had a show of those abstract drawings in 2016, right around this time. And I felt like, okay, cool, I've messed around with abstraction and techniques. I'm gonna bring it back to like imagery and try and bring some of the drawing techniques into these images. So my grandmother was like a big needle pointer. I grew up with the kind of like, cardinals and cats and kind of cutesy things around the house, but I also love that stuff. So I'm into nature and I'm into birds and plants. So I started trying to figure out how to bring in some of these languages of parallel lines into defining pictures. So I did the cardinal. This is asparagus, some cherry tomatoes. And this is a little bit different. Rather than like surrounding something, I'm inhabiting a line. So I would draw these in marker real fast and then start to fill them up with lines and color combinations to create image and form. This is a big one of the Williamsburg Bridge. It took me about a year. Again, I've been in Williamsburg for a long time, so this bridge is very meaningful to me. And it's also one of the more unsung pieces of architecture in New York. But you can see what it looks like up close. So every color that you see is actually a set of different parallel lines in combination interacting with each other. Oh, here's me at the gallery. I was going to show you this in totem, so you have just a different perspective. So what looks like purple is actually pink and blue. The yellow is yellow and orange, and lots of different kinds of things going on. There's me and my partner. We do like, photo bombing throughout the day. It's a group show we did 2018 called Baggage Claim. David Gilbert again. This is the Independent Art Fair in New York right before COVID, like literally March of last year. We did a show of Alex Dodge's paintings. We refer to this as like the Indiana Jones, like with the gate closing and like you grab your hat because we really like everything got shut down like the next week after this art fair, and we did okay. Like we actually sold work at this, so it helped us like pad through the 2 months of being closed. So it was a really, really lucky, and we knew it was out there. Like everybody was talking about it at the fair. This is a show we did in October called Mask. Everyone's thinking about masks in 2019. Here are some more recent drawings. Crisscrossing directions, again, inhabiting these markers, an oven mitt hanging on a stove, a tick. This actually is ballpoint and gel pen. So I draw the ballpoint in one direction and then the gel pen over it. And when you draw with ballpoint, it does that embossing thing on paper. So gel pen is a very different ink. It's liquid. Ballpoint's like a paste, and gel ink is like a liquid. So the gel ink kind of inhabits the valleys of the ballpoint, the channels of the ballpoint. So it really looks like needlepoint, or it comes pretty close to it. And this is one I've just finished in January called Ant Fight. Thinking about pavement ants. Totally apt for the last couple months, right? Well, I wasn't necessarily thinking in that direction. I just was interested in this image. And that's it. That leads us to today.
Well, that was absolutely incredible. Such amazing work. I guess
Thank
now
you.
we'll open it up to some questions if anybody has some.
I'd love to ask a question or two.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of biased because I'm very focused in printmaking, but I've noticed, like, as an illustrator, as someone who draws a lot, like, what advice can you give in terms of like using like printmaking techniques, like you mentioned, like stenciling and like engravings and embossing and stuff? Like, how can that like only help your drawing skills, like make them like escalate to the next level?
Totally. I had been interested in engraving for years, and I was like, oh, I actually want to try engraving. And I went to like a weekend workshop, and it was like having two left hands. Like I was like, I don't understand this. It's so hard to like cut and to displace copper with an awl, and you're not actually moving your hand. You're turning the copper into your hand. And I was like, it's going to take me 10 years to get good at it. You can see that window. You're like, okay, I know this is going to be really hard. But I kept up, I fooled around with it for like a month. I did it. I should have really brought some of my prints into this. I'm sorry. But it completely changed the way I drew. Like I was like, oh shit, like directional mark making, and you can round form with lines, and thinking about ways, like you have to, it's either on or off with engraving. Like you're incorporating lines. There's either a mark or there isn't. So that really fed into the way I thought, definitely when I was doing these parallel line drawings. It's really zeros and ones. So how many layers can you make of zeros and ones? And that's kind of like where that like information theory platform came from. It came from engraving. Screen printing, like larger fields, thinking in layers, like that's really important. Especially like when you're making any kind of print, you're making multiple plates, you have multiple screens, like you need to like separate those things in your mind. That teaches you so much about layering and color. And all these drawings, the later ones that I showed you, like they have a marker underlayer, and the ballpoint ink is translucent. So that underlayer of marker is going to come through, So you need to think strategically, like, okay, if there's a blue under this pink and yellow, like what's that going to do? If there's a red, if it's a bright red, like I can't draw a blue on top of that because it's just going to turn black. So you have, I learned all that from screen printing. And every time you switch medium, even if it's for a day or like just to do something you're uncomfortable with, like you will learn from it. You will bring it back into your practice. It's really good for you to, I think, switch it up and try different things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
I've got a question. With Klaus Gallery, I know you guys started as kind of a artist space type deal, and I'm wondering, when you're working with other artists in trying to create a gallery like that, how did you sort of allot responsibility between all of the members of that?
Yeah, that's a really important question for artist-run spaces, and you tend to see, because I know a lot of artists that run spaces. Some last for 6 months, some last for 20 years, and there's usually someone that's like managing it, and especially if it's a big collective, if there's like 10 people, there's usually one person that you'll see like organizing the meetings and doing like stuff like that. And my partners definitely do way more of that than I do. You talk it through. In any relationship, this is also a thing, like any relationship is communication. So you just need to be talking through like how everyone's feeling, what's going on, how are we going to plan this? And we have 2 meetings a week, the 3 of us, and we just like one meeting, we talk through like what we're going to do during the week. And then one meeting we have like long-term, like if it's what artists are doing, what if it's sales, like we have longer term ideas, and a lot of that stuff we've built into. We didn't know anything about running a gallery. Sam, my partner, worked as an installer at a few galleries, like helping install shows, but that was the most experience, like hanging work. So we had to learn all the other stuff, admin, all that stuff, either on the fly or ask people for help. And we definitely ask people for help. And if you can find, like any field you go into, like you need mentors, you need people that will be there to answer questions if you need them. It's important. And then in turn, like if you've been around for a while, like then it's your responsibility to like help people that are coming up and don't know anything. And I feel that. So, but yeah, it's important to be clear and communicate like who's going to do what so that people don't get resentful or leave. And then a lot of it, you have to, check your ego sometimes too. That's an important part of relationships.
Right.
Very true. I have another question.
Sure. Yeah.
So for somebody that's really interested in printmaking, what would you recommend as like a good jumping off point into getting into it?
Okay. Like, what do you mean interested? Like learning more about it, or actually like getting on?
Learning more, but like hands-on practice itself. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things you can do. If it's just like I'm interested in screen printing, straight up, like, I took continuing ed classes at SVA I took it twice, because the first time you just like, it takes a long time to get good at it. But like schools have continuing ed classes. Like that's a great way to do it. You use the school that you're in. You guys are all, use every
Columbia.
facility you can. Use Columbia College for all you can. Ask questions, like be in there, and try as much as you can while you have the facilities, because when you get out,
I'm paying for them.
Yeah, you're paying for them. Yeah, and when you get out, you're like, now what? Like there's nothing. So sometimes you have to pay $300 for a continuing education class just to have access to the studios and a teacher who's around to ask questions to, and you need a vacuum seal and a spray booth and all that shit, light table, and then there's tons of independent printmakers out there. I know there's a bunch in Chicago. Every city's got like people that are just doing it themselves, and call them up, ask them if they need help. come in an afternoon a week and just be like, I'll do whatever you need just to be around and in there. And then, just get some on the job training, I would say volunteer your time at first just to get in the door. And then if you can be helpful to them and they can pay you, like, even better. Or, you can trade for studio time or for press time. That's the best way. And then beyond that, like, start your own thing, get a risograph printer or do potato prints with some friends, like you can start editioning things. If you want to start, if you want to say, I'm a print publisher, you can say it today and be like, okay, I'm going to call 3 artists that I think are cool. They might be my classmates or they might be people that I like on Instagram, and be like, hey, I'll do potato prints with you if you want to do an edition.
Yeah.
That's like, why not? There's nothing, maybe they'll say no, but maybe they won't. And so that's just start. I think.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sam, you got a question?
Hey.
Hi, Sam.
So I'm actually, here, I'll lower my hand. I'm an MFA student here at Columbia, and I focus in print. So if Kate or any of y'all ever want to send me stuff, I'm more than happy to review it. I'm in Hyde Park. I'm having a hard time getting to the print shop, but I know Chris Flynn and Megan Sterling also do workshops at CPC on the north side, and there's Spudnik. There's so many resources here, and come summer, I'm gonna make my damnedest effort to be at those places, even Columbia, because our resources are fantastic. So not being able to be in the shop is excruciating, honestly.
Oh man, are you guys all shut out?
It's open, but it's kind of a chore to get there. You have to do your screening and then commuting, and we're snowed in.
Yeah.
So
actually, Sam, thank you so much for that. I would definitely love to reach out to you. Amanda and I work at the print shop, and Darby used to, so we're very familiar with it and stuff. And it's just such an awesome place. And Columbia really has such a renowned group of people and just such an awesome shop. So definitely, if you're interested, come hang out, get authorized, obviously. But thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Sam. That's awesome.
And then I actually had a few questions. Just curious about the general scale, and then especially during COVID, how is your gallery doing?
General scale, like my home desk, I don't really get bigger than, I would say, like 14 inches. And then my studio desk, I can get up to about 3 feet. And I generally work in the, like, I would say like 20, on a larger scale, like 20 to 40 inches. So not huge, but mostly much smaller. Time constraints force me to, and also they don't, I could make a much larger parallel ruler, but the standard size doesn't go too large. And thank you for asking about COVID. We're doing okay. Like there's COVID, it's affected everybody differently. Some people have had a horrendous experience, unfortunately, too many people. And then, some people, some businesses, like it's actually been okay. And again, because people are home a lot, they're considering their settings and thinking about, I was just talking to Darby Jack about this before it started, like people are considering what they have on their walls. And so people have been reaching out about art. And also, again, this is born out of tragedy because the other cultural institutions in New York are just flattened. But the art galleries, like there's never that many people in an art gallery, so we're able to stay open and we can interact with people. So we have pretty regular traffic. I would say maybe more than pre-COVID, because there's not that much else to do. So people want to see culture and they want to engage with people. So we've been okay, thankfully. Knock on wood.
Great. Do we have any other questions? I've got one more. I know these works take like a long time often, like you were talking about 1.5 to 2 years for some of these pieces. In terms of sort of making that commitment to a piece like that, what's sort of the process of that? And do you have any tips for that process?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm usually working up to a larger drawing, so I'll have like a certain skill set. Like I feel like I'm able to get to a certain skill level with where I want to go with something before I'm like, okay, I can scale up on this now, but like not enough to make it boring. Like you still want in every piece, I think, like to be trying something for the first time, because there's a joy in that, and there's like a you're finding a new way or a way to explore. So there's like a middle ground there, and I think it's important to have both. Like I wouldn't want to like make a small drawing and then like blow it up and do it again, because like I would go bored out of my mind if spending a year on it. So there's a part where you want to not know what it's going to look like, and sometimes you're like, oh shit, this isn't going to work. And you start sweating because you invested 6 months into something, but you figure it out. Or like nobody's gonna, the mistakes you think are huge are like, no one's ever going to notice them. So that's also important. Like just like stay calm, it's going to be okay. Like you're defining the terms, you're defining your own parameters, so you get to make decisions about what's working, what's not. Yeah, I think it's really just like feeling like you're mentally prepared to leap up to a larger scale, or like you've done the homework and the training you need to execute something a little more ambitious. That's usually where I'm at in something, and I'll do at least one study before I jump into a larger one.
Great. Well, that's about our time. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming. This was absolutely such a treat. So much fun, and the work you presented was just incredible. And thank you all for joining us and coming to this talk. Our next speaker is actually March 14th with Joshua Abelo, which that's going to be very fun. So,
I know Josh, good guy.
Oh, you know Josh?
Yeah, we went to school together.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited about that one. That's going to be a great time. But yeah, do you have any final things to say, Rob?
No, but if you I have an Instagram at Butt Johnson. If you guys have questions or are wondering about anything, like absolutely feel free to reach out. I'm happy to
Thank you.
to talk to you. And if you're ever in New York, please stop by the gallery, 54 Ludlow Street. We'll be down there, and be great to meet you in person when we're doing things like that.
Great. Well, I'm going to stop live now, but